That regal blue blood the European elite have always so arrogantly prided themselves on, ironically enough, originates from an alkaline, salt-drenched sandpit in the deepest reaches of Xinjiang, China. Look down at your wrists, right now. See those faint, pale, and fragile veins? From the cradle to the time you started school, you have been brainwashed by a perfect linguistic virus. Blue blood. Oh, how noble, how superior it sounds. It forces you to believe that privilege belongs to those perching arrogantly on European thrones, trampling upon the heads of the lowly mortals below. But among the hundreds of thousands of people mindlessly regurgitating that phrase every single day, has anyone bothered to ask, where did the greatest hierarchy in human history actually seep from? Spain? Forget it. Step back 3 millennia and shift your gaze to the Tarim Basin. If hell had an alkaline salt sauna, this would be it. A natural embalming oven so harsh it would make the Egyptian pharaohs green with envy. There they dug up a direct slap in the face to modern historians. A 3,000-year-old corpse. By all rights, according to all the deceitful textbooks you've ever read, he shouldn't have been allowed to exist there. A giant, standing 1.80 meters tall, with deep-set eyes, a prominent nose, and, oh my God, brilliant auburn hair. A gene that the East Asian ancestors of that era couldn't have squeezed out even if they mutated to the point of breaking their chromosomes. And don't go thinking he was some wandering nomad in a ragged animal skin loincloth. No. He was dressed in tailored wool with stitching that defied time itself, wearing high-quality leather boots on his feet. Wrapped around him was a woven cloth with a checkered pattern. Yes, the exact same tartan fabric that the Celts all the way in Scotland would only learn to wear 1,000 years later while bashing each other. The red ochre smeared across his face screamed a wordless message from the ancient world. I am the ruler. A discovery so shocking that it reshaped the entire DNA of power. You'd think it would be fervently embraced by the scientific community. Dead wrong. It was suppressed, swept into the shadows for decades by the local authorities. A place that always stamps everything with modern red-inked borders. Why tremble before a shriveled-up skeleton? Because sometimes a lifeless corpse is a ticking time bomb that can level an entire national narrative system. Because he is the dead proof that the history we are swallowing every day is merely a commodity that has been trimmed, whitewashed, and neatly packaged to fit political agendas. To understand who this red-haired giant was and why he holds the key to that deceitful blue blood, we must leave this sandpit. We must go back in time to an era where power was never measured by plots of dead earth, but measured by speed. Welcome to Dark History. I am Zorro, and today, together, we are going to exhume the past. Look down at your wrist, right now. Do you see those faint veins beneath your skin? Pale, weak, and filled with myths. From the time you were still in your cradle until you went to school, you were spoon-fed a phrase that you probably never truly questioned. Blue blood. Oh, how noble it sounds, how regal. It conjures images of kings sitting on thrones, powerful clans that have stood at the top of the food chain since the dawn of time, ruling over the lesser mortals of the earth. This phrase is deeply rooted in English, French, Spanish, and German. It is a linguistic virus so perfect that children who don't even know how to write yet understand. Blue means power. But I have a small, ironic truth for you. Out of the 100,000 people who chew on and repeat that phrase every day, not one, absolutely not one, takes the trouble to find out where that blue blood actually flows from. You think it originated with the Spanish elite? No. Go back much further. What this phrase is actually describing, the cradle that birthed the greatest hierarchy in human history, does not lie in magnificent European castles. It lies in a corridor of grasslands and wind, stretching for a relentless 8,000 kilometers. It lies in a place where the modern governments inheriting that land have spent 2 full centuries and billions of dollars just to ensure one thing: you will never be allowed to lay eyes on it. Welcome to the westernmost region of China, Xinjiang. More precisely, the Tarim Basin. If hell had an alkaline salt sauna, this would be it. The land here is so harsh that it preserves death better than the Egyptians mummified their pharaohs. And at a museum in Urumqi, there is an uninvited guest, a body that, according to all the history textbooks taught in your schools, should not be allowed to exist there. They dug him out from under the salty sand. Age, about 3,000 years old. That means thousands of years before Jesus was born, even before the Roman Empire was even an idea. But the problem isn't his age. The problem is his body. This man stands 6 feet tall, about 1.83 meters. Standing among the Asian inhabitants of that era, he was nothing short of a giant. And his hair, his hair is a direct slap to the face of historians. Thanks to the miracle of the alkaline desert soil, that hair remains intact after 3 millennia. It is auburn, a vibrant reddish brown that the genome of East Asian ancestors could not possibly have produced, no matter how much it mutated. Look at his face. It is so perfectly preserved that one could reconstruct it without needing much imagination. A narrow, high-bridged nose, deep-set eye sockets. This cranial bone structure, it is screaming an origin from as far away as Western Eurasia, not East Asia. But let's set DNA aside. Look at how he is dressed. What do you think a wandering nomad, barely scraping by day to day in the desert, would wear? A ragged animal skin loincloth, perhaps? No, his clothes are tailored wool of outstanding quality, with stitching that defies time itself. On his feet are fine leather boots, and the shroud wrapping around him is a plaid-patterned woven cloth. Ladies and gentlemen, that is tartan fabric. That's right, the exact same weave structure that the Celts of Scotland would wear to go to battle, but a full 1,000 years later. On his face, they painted a mask of red ochre. In the ancient world, you didn't paint red ochre on the face of a nobody. You used it for those who held power. He was not a lost victim buried by a sandstorm. He was an individual of supreme status, buried solemnly, carefully, and deliberately, right in the middle of a territory where every modern geographical map today draws red ink borders around and stamps belongs to China. And this is when the truth becomes most ironic. You think a monumental discovery like this would be widely publicized? That the world's scientists would flock here? Wrong. The host government shut down all access to these remains immediately after they were discovered. They hid it away in the shadows for years. The international research community had to struggle for decades just to beg for the privilege of independent study. Why? Why fear a skeleton that withered away 3,000 years ago? Because a lifeless corpse is sometimes a time bomb threatening an entire national narrative. because he is living proof, or rather, dead proof, that the history we are reading has been expunged, bleached, and packaged to fit modern political agendas. That very truth, this very cover-up, is where our story truly begins. To understand who this red-haired giant was and why he holds the key to the blue blood that ruled the world, we must leave this sandpit. We must turn back time, returning to a place where power was measured not by land, but by speed. If you open any history book, what will you see? Egypt's brilliant Nile River, fertile Mesopotamia, or China's Great Yellow River. We are always taught that civilization, Munmyong, is born from mud, from people with their faces buried in the fields, planting rice, building city walls, and locking themselves inside them. But I want you to wipe that dregs of knowledge from your mind immediately. Listen closely. Before 1500 BC, the center of the world did not lie in granaries. It lay right here, the Eurasian Steppe, a colossal, boundless corridor of grass and fierce winds stretching a relentless 8,000 kilometers from modern-day Hungary straight to the borders of China. This is not the center of the world in some flowery, cliché, poetic, metaphorical sense. No, it was the center logistically, geographically, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, militarily. It was the only viable overland route connecting everything. It was the internet of the ancient world, the superhighway upon which mankind's greatest and deadliest technologies were circulated. Bronze Age metallurgy hitched a ride on this road. The wheel, an invention you take for granted every time you get into a car, in its most practical and raw forms, ground across this grass long before it ever rolled anywhere else on the planet. But wheels and bronze were still not enough. To dominate the world, they needed something living, something that could transform humans from slow, two-legged creatures into gods of speed. The horse. Do not underestimate this animal. Before humanity invented gunpowder, there was no technology, no machine that could reshape warfare, trade, and the balance of political power as brutally and thoroughly as the domesticated horse. On the Pontic-Caspian steppe, located right on the northern shores of the Black Sea's dark waters, anonymous people achieved the unthinkable. They climbed onto the backs of those wild monsters, slipped reins into their mouths, and turned them into extensions of their own bodies. Try putting yourself in the shoes of a settled farmer back then. For the first time in your life, you look up at the horizon and see a blinding whirlwind of dust approaching. There, a creature, half man, half beast, carrying a bow and arrow is galloping toward you at a speed you have never witnessed in nature. You have no walls high enough, no legs fast enough. You can only stand there and wait to die. These first horse archers understood their economic value and devastating military power long, long before the rest of the world even knew what fear was. And who was behind this terrifying evolution? Who carried the seeds of blue blood to sow from east to west? Archaeologists call them by a somewhat academic name, the Sintashta culture. Their remains lie silently beneath the mounds in the southern reaches of the majestic Ural Mountains. They are not a tiny footnote printed fuzzily in the margins of someone else's history book. Oh no, my friends. They were the engine, the core element that propelled the entire machine of history into motion. The Sintashta people didn't just ride horses. They designed humanity's first perfect war machine, the spoked wheel chariot. Instead of heavy, clumsy, solid wooden wheels, they hollowed them out, using spokes to minimize weight. The result? A chariot light as flight, agile as a hunting cheetah, and carrying the destructive force of an ancient tank. Within a mere 2 centuries, a blink of an eye in history, the Sintashta chariot swept through and permanently altered the landscape of warfare from Egypt all the way to China. They maintained bronze foundries on an industrial scale unimaginable to their contemporaries. They herded horse populations massive enough to deploy cavalries that made the earth sink. No settled agricultural civilization, no matter how populous, no matter how much they beat their chests, claiming to be the center of the universe, could withstand a collision with them in open terrain. And this is the perfect missing piece that the Chinese government does not want you to think about. From 2010 to 2020, science stepped in. DNA extracted from ancient tombs in the southern Urals spoke. It painted a grand map of migration. That map proves that the Sintashta people were the tipping point. From this cradle, a wave of flesh and blood expanded. They went west, becoming the notorious Scythian warriors who struck terror into the Persian Empire. And they went east, crossing the steppe, cutting through sandstorms, only for one of their bloodline descendants to close his eyes for the last time in the salt desert of the Tarim basin. Our red-haired giant did not appear out of thin air. He was a remnant of the first kings on horseback, those whose blood truly decided who would rule the world. But to maintain that absolute power, they needed more than just chariots. They needed arrogance, they needed sophistication, and they needed the most terrifying weapon of all, absolute isolation. Humanity has a very funny habit. We always judge the civilization of a group of people by the amount of bricks and stones they stack on top of each other. You have castles. You are nobility. You have towering city walls. You are a great empire. You live on horseback and sleep under the stars. Oh, you are just a bunch of smelly savages not worth bothering with. But in the 5th century BC, a Greek man named Herodotus recognized the stupidity of that mindset. He packed his bags, traveled to remote Greek colonies, sitting isolated on the northern shores of the Black Sea, and sat drinking wine with weathered, seasoned merchants. And from those fragmented accounts, Herodotus recorded the portrait of a force casting a dark shadow over the entire ancient world. The Scythians. And if you think the Scythians were just a bunch of wandering nomads shepherding sheep aimlessly, you are dead wrong. Wrong enough to lose your life. The truth is, the Scythians possessed a culture so sophisticated that it twisted every definition of a state. Do you know why they had no cities? It wasn't because they were ignorant of how to lay bricks. It was a deliberate design, a stroke of genius in the art of war. Think about it. You build a wall, you have to defend it. You create a capital city, the enemy knows exactly where to bring their catapults to besiege you. A city is essentially just a giant, voluntary mousetrap. But how can you besiege something that never stands still? A mobile ruling class is an invincible ruling class. Scythian kings did not rule from marble thrones. They carried the entire state apparatus on spoked wheels. They moved alongside roaring artisan workshops casting metal right in the middle of the desert. They dragged along skilled surgeons, diligent scribes, and master craftsmen. They cast their diplomatic net in all directions, maintaining parallel treaties with the colossal Persian Empire, the arrogant Greek city-states, and even the wild tribes hiding away in the gloomy northern forests. Any merchant caravan that dared drag their bones across Scythian territory had to pay taxes. The largest, most ruthless toll-collecting empire on the planet. And if you need proof of their sophistication, buy a ticket to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. An entire massive exhibition room is filled with nothing but Scythian gold. Their animal-style metalworking art is not something you can teach yourself overnight. It is a technical tradition refined over centuries. In the entire ancient world, no one could match them in the density of craftsmanship packed into every square inch of gold. They were savage monsters with the souls of the most flawless goldsmiths. Of course, the arrogance of the weak always seeks to challenge the strength of the strong. 513 BC. King Darius the Great of the colossal Persian Empire found them to be an eyesore. This man was no ordinary king. He had crushed Egypt under his heel. He had swallowed great Babylon. His empire was the grandest humanity had ever witnessed up to that point. And Darius decided it was time to teach those northern nomads a lesson. He led an army across the Danube River. Ancient historical sources swear he brought 700,000 men. Surely chroniclers always love to inflate numbers, but no matter how much you scale it down, it was still a colossal meat grinder, eclipsing the sky with spears and banners. Darius intended to conquer the Scythians. The plan was perfect except for one small detail. To win a war, your enemy has to agree to fight you. That historic campaign ended without a single major battle ever taking place. Wherever Darius's army of hundreds of thousands went, the grass was burned to ash. Water wells were filled in. The enemy was always on the horizon, but never within range. The Persian army kept marching, depleting, starving, and going mad in the middle of an ocean of barren grass. And then the pinnacle of humiliation arrived. King Edanthersis of the Scythians finally condescended to send Darius a message. A messenger entered the Persian camp and dropped a bundle. You think it was gold and silver tribute? A letter of surrender? No. There were 4 things in that bundle: a bird, a mouse, a frog, 5 arrows. The Persian royal scholars gathered around, stroked their chins, and deluded each other. Birds fly in the sky, mice burrow in the ground, frogs live in the water, and arrows are weapons. They are handing over all their land, sky, waters, and weapons to us. They have surrendered. But Darius was not as foolish as his sycophants. He looked at those items and felt a chill run down his spine. It was not a surrender. It was a deadly riddle, a curse from the king of grass and wind. The real message was this: O you who call yourselves masters of the world, unless you can grow wings and fly into the sky like that bird, unless you can dig holes and hide underground like that mouse, unless you can leap and escape through the swamps like that frog, otherwise, the moment you turn your backs, you will never survive to escape these arrows of ours. What did Darius the Great do? He ordered his forces to turn around. The most powerful man on earth, leading the mightiest empire in the world, had to choke down his humiliation, slinkingly withdrawing his troops across the Danube and heading home with his tail tucked between his legs. The ghosts controlling the steppe used blood and despair to carve a theorem into history, a theorem that would continue to be ruthlessly true for the next 2,000 years. You cannot march an army to defeat them on their own terrain. You can only sit at home, pray, and wait for them to find you themselves. And they will come. They will surely come. But there was something strange about these bringers of terror. When they finally revealed themselves, their appearance was a shock that shattered every racial stereotype known to both Eastern and Western chroniclers. We must rely on Herodotus once again. This Greek did not just recount bloody wars, he also left a record of the appearance of these steppe ghosts. Within the massive, borderless empire of the Scythians, there existed an absolute apex class, those who stood above all others. History calls them the royal Scythians. They were the core ruling lineage, those who held vast herds, controlled the most prestigious wives, and monopolized lavish burial rituals filled with gold and jewels. But their power did not lie solely in wealth or armies. Their power lay in their very skin and bones. Listen carefully to this. The Greek colonies on the shores of the Black Sea traded with them for generations. And how did they describe the royal Scythians? Unusually tall, light-colored, piercing eyes, and in countless instances, hair that shone brilliantly pale under the sun. Try looking around the ancient world at that time. They did not look like the dark-skinned Greeks of the Mediterranean. They looked absolutely nothing like the short, laboring tribes clinging to the dark forests and mountains to the north. And of course, they shared even less in common with the black-eyed, black-haired populations of the Far East. They were a specific race, a race recognizable at first glance from a distance of 100 yards. You think that was a coincidence of nature? Oh no, don't be so naive. It was a design, a cold, calculating, spine-chillingly ruthless plan. They continuously reproduced themselves over centuries, using the most terrifying weapon of the elite, endogamy. They only married and bore children within their own bloodline. This deliberate genetic isolation was not due to a lack of options. It was a matter of political and cultural survival. They had to keep their appearance completely distinct from those they ruled. Physical difference was the natural crown fused directly to their skulls. When you are taller, with different colored eyes and hair more vibrant than those trembling and kneeling at your feet, you are no longer human. You are a god. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the primitive, raw, and bloody definition of the phrase blue blood. Not because their blood was blue, but because that bloodline was locked away, never allowed to mix with those at the bottom of society. Now, let's shift our compass to the east, far to the east, where the Chinese dynasties considered themselves the center of the universe. Around 165 BC, the imperial chronicles of the Chinese court frantically recorded an event. A steppe tribe called the Yuezhi, who had just been uprooted and pushed eastward by the brutal Xiongnu Empire, appeared before their eyes. Imagine you are a Han Dynasty chronicler. All your life, you are only used to seeing soldiers with black hair, brown eyes, and yellow skin. And then one day, these armed refugees gallop up to your city gates. You bite down on the tip of your brush, trying to find words to describe these creatures. And the chronicles had to exclaim, not just once, but recorded repeatedly out of sheer astonishment, those with green or blue eyes, those with blazing red hair or pale hair resembling dry straw. That was not the vivid imagination of Chinese historians. They did not have the leisure to write poetry. They were describing a nightmare in the flesh, because that appearance did not belong to any familiar population within the reach of the Chinese court. So who were they? They were the ghosts. The final roots of the blue blood tree that had sprouted from the Eurasian Steppe. They were the brothers, the descendants of the Santashta chariots of the gold-laden Scythian kings. and the auburn-haired giant lying beneath the salt layers in the Tarim Basin, the westernmost edge of China. He was not lost. He was right in his own homeland, on the eastern fringe of the greatest steppe empire that humanity has deliberately tried to forget. Do you understand now why the museum doors in Xinjiang are locked tight? Why are they so afraid of a 3,000-year-old skeleton? Because he is undeniable proof that thousands of years before modern political borders were drawn with red ink and guns, this 8,000-kilometer grassland corridor was already the playground of red-haired, blue-eyed kings. The creators of the chariot, those who forced the world to its knees before speed. Next time someone uses the phrase blue blood to picture some effeminate, wig-wearing aristocrats in Europe, or the elite status of a civilized world, remember the Tarim Basin. Remember the chariots charging through sandstorms. True human royalty was not born in marble palaces. It was born on horseback, forged in bronze foundries, and maintained by the most ruthless laws of survival on the barren grasslands. And sometimes the true history of humanity is just a layer of salty sand away, waiting for the day to speak. (1993) The Ukok Plateau. If you look on a map, this is the end of the world, the freezing intersection between Siberia, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan. A place where the cold doesn't just freeze water, it freezes time itself. Russian archaeologist Natalia Polosmak was leading an excavation team at a burial mound. You know, archaeologists, legal grave robbers with government licenses. And then, beneath that permafrost layer, they broke a quiet seal that had lasted for 2.5 millennia. Inside the vault, resting in eternal sleep, was a woman. Let me paint this picture for your imagination. Forget the images of withered Egyptian mummies wrapped in tattered rags. She stood 5 feet 6 inches tall, about 1.67 meters, a remarkable height for that era. Her hair was light-colored, cascading softly down. She was clothed in fine hand-woven silk and wool garments, of a quality so exceptional that even the tailors of today's luxury fashion houses in Paris would bow in respect. But that isn't even the craziest part. Look at her flesh, skin art, tattoos. Stretching from her shoulder down to her arm was a terrifying and exquisite canvas of life and death. Mythological elk with sprawling antlers turning into floral patterns, majestic griffins, and predatory felines twisting together in an endless dance of steppe life. The sophistication of it? My friends, modern tattoo artists, those possessing the most advanced electronic tattoo machines, have had to stare blankly at photographs of her skin to steal her technique. These lines were not the work of an amateur rubbing ink into a wound. They represent years of training, hundreds of hours of bleeding labor, executed by true masters who regarded piercing needles into flesh as a sacred profession. She did not cross over to the afterlife alone. 6 horses, the most magnificent steeds, were sacrificed, their necks broken, their bodies carefully arranged around her in the dark vault. They placed horses next to her, and by her hand was a container filled with cannabis. Well, it seems the ancients also knew how to make time travel a bit less stressful, right? Atop her head stood a towering hat made of carved wood, gilded in gold leaf, rising nearly 3 feet, about 90 centimeters, above her skull. Imagine the weight of it. You don't wear something like that to go to the market or cook. It was a crown of power, of supreme spiritual rituals. Science calls her the Ice Maiden or the Ukok Princess, but to the native Altai people, To the Altai people, she is the ancestor, a guardian deity watching over the gates of the underworld. But you already know how the modern civilized world operates. You have a sacred ancestor resting in the womb of Mother Earth. How nice. We're going to steal her. She was dug up, ripped from the land that had embraced her for 2,500 years, and stuffed into a freezer to be transported to a museum in Novosibirsk, 400 kilometers away. The Altai parliament stood up. They were outraged. They voted 3 separate times, begging, demanding the return of their ancestors' remains to her homeland. The result? She is still lying exposed in a glass display case in Novosibirsk. Because why respect the beliefs of indigenous people when you can sell tickets to tourists to gawk at a corpse, right? But the irony of fate lies right here. Those who stole her, those who took her DNA samples for analysis, discovered a truth that overturned every prejudice. She belonged to haplogroup U5A2A, not East Asian, not South Asian. She was a Western Eurasian. Her blood carried a mitochondrial genetic code originating from ancient European steppe populations. This gene line is found in its highest density on the Pontic-Caspian steppe itself, the very cradle that birthed the notorious Scythian warriors, the Yamnaya people, and every force that trampled that 8,000-kilometer corridor under their horses' hooves for 2 millennia. She lies there, in the heart of the Altai Mountains, in the middle of the territory that the Encyclopedia Britannica calls Tartaria. She is proof in bone, in flesh, in skin, and in tattoo ink of a great, borderless steppe empire. And the government holding her captive, ironically, will never give her back. This injustice is just the tip of a colossal iceberg. Because if you think the Ukok princess is a rare, glittering exception among a bunch of savage nomads, you are dead wrong. Fasten your seatbelts, because we are about to head west to a place called Issyk, where the concepts of civilization and barbarism are about to be ripped into thousands of shredded gold pieces. Let's leave the bone-chilling cold of Siberia. Mount up, my friends. We are going to gallop southwest, cutting through the dusty winds to reach the land of Kazakhstan. More specifically, the outskirts of a tiny town we call Issyk today. If the Ice Maiden proves the sophistication in the art of body preservation and tattooing of prehistoric steppe people, then the thing lying beneath the burial mound in Issyk, this thing is a direct slap in the face to the history textbooks that you and I were forced to memorize. The 4th or 5th century BC. While the Greeks were busy arguing about philosophy in their white togas, and Rome was just a fledgling republic taking its first tottering steps, here, on this howling, windy steppe, a young male warrior closed his eyes for the last time. And how did they bury him? With a handful of dirt and a few prayers? No. They buried him beneath 4,000 gold artifacts. 4,000 items of gold. Let that number sink into your brain for a moment. Not clunky gold blocks, but 4,000 miniature works of art. Leopards, deer, and eagles exquisitely handcrafted down to every single scale, every single feather, in the majestic animal style of the Scythians. The outfit he wore? Completely covered in sewn-on gold plaques. The arrows for him to take to the afterlife? Made of gold. Everything shimmered with a brilliant metallic glow. Science calls him by a name that couldn't be more literal and uncreative: the Golden Man. Yes, they actually call him that. But believe me, That name cannot fully capture his sheer arrogance. But here is the real magic trick. Amidst those 4,000 glaringly gold items, there is a silver cup. And on that silver cup, 26 characters are engraved. 26 letters, an alphabet. You know what the most ridiculous part is? 60 years have passed since the day this tomb was excavated. 6 decades of development in supercomputers, in AI, of the most brilliant linguistic minds in the world. And up to the very second I am talking to you, these 26 characters have yet to be fully deciphered. Well, it seems the savages left behind a cipher that the superior civilization of the 21st century still furiously scratches its head over in utter helplessness. The concept of barbarian, a term full of contempt invented by the Greeks and Romans to call anyone who didn't speak their language, who didn't live in their stone and brick city-states. We have been brainwashed into thinking that the steppe was merely a dumping ground for primitive, filthy, nomadic tribes, wandering aimlessly on horseback, craning their necks, waiting for civilization to come and enlighten them. But the Golden Man of Kazakhstan demands that we redefine that entire idiotic vocabulary system. He was not some savage who accidentally stumbled upon a gold bar. He was the heir to a ruling system, a social structure rooted so ruthlessly deep into the material culture of the steppe, a society where even death demanded an insane level of material representation. 4,000 peak artistic artifacts just to honor the passing of a single human being. They weren't waiting for civilization, my friends. Apologies to the Western historians sulking in their libraries, but they were civilization. The greatness of the steppe didn't die with the Golden Man or the Ice Maiden. It moved silently. It crept into DNA, clung to the blades of swords, and galloped towards the west, piercing straight into the heart of the old world. Do you think the steppe has nothing to do with the stone castles in Spain or the arrogant aristocracies of Europe? Well then, have you ever heard the 2 words, blue blood? Because the horror story of humanity's first legalized racism started with that very blood. Welcome to 15th century Spain. 15th century. We are in Castile, the epicenter of power in Spain. If you ask anyone today what the phrase blue blood means, they will shrug and say, oh, it's a metaphor for the nobles, the royals, the ones born with a silver spoon in their mouths. A poetic figure of speech, right? Wrong. It is not a metaphor. It was a physical concept. In bone, in flesh, and in ruthlessly legalized racism. Put yourself in the shoes of the Castilian elite at that time. They were suffering from collective paranoia. They had just expelled the Jews and were frantically tearing down 7 centuries of Moorish, North African Muslim cultural influence. In their panic to protect their privileges and consolidate their seats of power amidst a complex society, this aristocratic class invented a disgusting legal system called limpieza de sangre, purity of blood. You want to be a priest? You want to join a merchant guild? You want to step through the doors of a university or simply wield a sword for the royal army? Roll up your sleeves. Show us your blood. Under this law, old and pure Christian families claimed to possess a superior physical trait compared to those with ties to the Moors or the converts, conversos. Their skin was so pale that you could see right through to the veins underneath. Those peeking blue veins were the living witnesses, the invisible certificates proving that the blood flowing in their veins had never been tainted or diluted by ancestors with darker skin tones. Sangre azul, Blue blood, no visible blue veins? Congratulations. You were officially a second-class citizen in your own kingdom. And do you know what made this madness so terrifying? It was the participation of the bureaucracy. In 1449, the first Limpieza de Sangre statute was enacted in Toledo. It was like a virus. By 1547, it had infected the cathedral chapter of Toledo, the religious body holding the greatest power of life and death in Spain at the time. By the end of the 16th century, it had swallowed the entire empire. Every major institution demanded paperwork proving purity. A new industry was born, the industry of extorting from fear. The Inquisition became the gatekeepers holding the ledgers. Noble families had to cough up money to throw into their own genealogical investigations just to prove they were clean for at least 3 generations. And those notaries, they built incredibly lucrative careers, buying houses and land simply by stamping seals confirming that a certain lineage had never crossed the forbidden line drawn by the law. This was no longer just personal prejudice. This was a massive legal architecture designed with immense sophistication, revolving around exactly one thing: the assertion of a physical trait of a specific group of people. White skin, blue veins. Now, if you open the history books and ask the scholars, why did the Spanish nobility have such white skin and blue veins amidst a sun-drenched Iberian peninsula and its darker-skinned inhabitants? Their standard explanation is always very neat, concise, and safe. They will adjust their glasses and tell you, that is because of the Visigoths. That's right. The Visigoths. The ones who flooded in and occupied the Iberian Peninsula after the fall of Rome. Historians tell us that the Visigoths were a northern European tribe of the Germanic group, living in dense forests, rarely seeing the sun. Their descendants maintained a lighter skin pigment amidst a population that predominantly had a darker skin tone. Therefore, pale skin with blue veins was simply the badge announcing origins from that light-skinned founding class. Sounds incredibly reasonable, doesn't it? Nothing wrong with it. Perfect logic, except for one minor detail. It is profoundly flawed, even deceitful. Because the Visigoth didn't actually originate from the dark forests of northern Europe in any meaningful sense. That blue blood that the Spanish nobility were so radically proud of, in reality, has an origin story that would make them shudder if they knew the truth. And that truth takes us right back to the very place we just left, takes us back to the Ice Maiden, back to the Golden Man, back to the wild steppe. Forget the misty forests of northern Europe. That was just a transit stop on a much longer, bloodier, and far grander journey. The truth is, the Visigoths spent the most crucial centuries of their formative history not in the freezing peninsulas of the Baltic, but here, on this very Pontic steppe, exactly the land that the Scythians once mastered. They didn't live in isolation. They had direct contact, an intense blending both culturally and genetically, with the populations that had dominated this territory for 1,000 years before they showed up. You want archaeological proof? Gothic metalwork bears the heavy imprint of the Scythian animal style. It is so direct and consistent that, if you tossed a pile of artifacts to archaeologists, they would have to sweat bullets to distinguish which art belonged to the Goths and which to the Scythians. The burial practices of the Goths swallowed whole the customs of the steppe nomads. Visigoth warriors didn't just borrow a few horseback riding tricks. They assimilated the entire steppe cavalry technical system at a profound level of integration, proving generations of rubbing elbows and learning. They had become children of the steppe. And then, at the end of the 4th century, a storm swept through, the invasion of the Huns. Like a giant pack of wolves herding a flock of armed sheep, the Huns pushed the Gothic peoples westward, forcing them to run for their lives right into the core of the Roman Empire. But when the Visigoths flooded into Europe, they didn't go empty-handed. They brought with them a massive genetic and cultural legacy, a legacy forged from centuries of living in the exact same orbit of the ruling traditions that had operated on this steppe, since a time when Greek civilization wasn't even advanced enough to create a writing system to record it. Speaking of the Huns, European history molded Attila the Hun into the supreme symbol of Eastern barbarism, a monster who only knew how to eat raw meat and destroy. But listen to the testimony of Priscus, a Roman ambassador who personally visited Attila's court in 449 AD. What do you think he saw? A foul-smelling camp full of savages gnawing on bones? No. Priscus's jaw dropped at the sight of lavishly carved wooden palaces. He saw interior walls draped in magnificent silk curtains, and light reflecting off countless silver items. He specifically noted that silverware was used in all formal banquets. Look at this. These were organized diplomatic protocols strictly adhered to by representatives of the most powerful empires in the world at the time. A multilingual court, a perfectly orderly hierarchical system. The ruling class of the Huns knew exactly what they were doing. And in fact, they had been doing it under many different forms, many different names, for 2,000 years before Attila gave it a name that made the Romans cower in fear. And this is when all the pieces converge into a ruthlessly ironic picture. The Visigoths, the very people who brought pale skin with clearly prominent blue veins into the Iberian Peninsula, were the Western heirs to this entire magnificent legacy. That arrogant blue blood that the Castilian aristocracy used an entire legal system, an entire inquisition apparatus to protect in the 15th century? No. It was not a pure gift from the coniferous forests of the Northern Europeans. It was an echo, the furthest Western echo of a power that had once roared and expanded with the most terrifying intensity along 8,000 kilometers of grasslands for 2,000 years. The 15th century Spanish nobles, proudly boasting of their pure bloodlines, ironically, were waving the genetic flag of the very Eastern barbarians they so deeply despised. They were the flesh and blood of Tartary. They were the remnants of the steppe. History always has a truly dark sense of humor, doesn't it? Next time someone proudly beats their chest boasting about their superior bloodline or origins, remember the 4,000 gold items beneath the Isaac tomb. Remember the 2,500-year-old tattoos beneath the permafrost. And remember that sometimes the truth about your roots is exactly what your ancestors had to pay to hide. How do you kill a human being? Too easy. A bullet, a gulp of arsenic, or a clumsily staged carriage accident. But how do you kill an entire land? How do you strangle a civilization, dump its corpse, and wipe the crime scene clean of all traces? Look at the eastern half of this massive territory. The sand and dust of the Tarim Basin, the flesh-cutting winds of the Altai Mountains, the endless stretches of steppe reaching far into the horizon. If you open the renowned Encyclopedia Britannicas from previous centuries, you will see this entire territory slapped with a single name: Tartary. A name that echoed with pride. But then, try looking at the map on your phone right now. There is no Tartary. It has evaporated. Why? Because governments, the ones calling themselves the rightful heirs to that land, woke up one fine day and suddenly realized the existence of Tartary was quite inconvenient. And when history becomes inconvenient, people don't rewrite it. They burn it to the ground. Let's turn back the clock to the middle of a harsh Russian winter. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a blizzard, but the thing making you shiver isn't the cold. It's the roaring of 100,000 warriors. 100,000 men. They were rallied by a Cossack named Yemelyan Pugachev, sweeping across that very grand territory of Tartary. His rebellion was so ferocious that it nearly chewed through the neck of the Russian Empire and toppled the throne itself. But he failed, and the person sitting on the throne at the time, Empress Catherine the Great, showed him exactly what the wrath of an empire looked like. January 13th, 1775, Catherine issued a decree. Remember this, a decree written in the most icy, freezing language of imperial law, a document that currently still lies coiled like a venomous snake in the Russian state archives. She didn't just behead Pugachev. Beheading was too humane, too swift. She wanted much more than that. First, she changed the name of the Yaik River to the Ural River. Second, the fierce Yaik Cossacks were stripped of their identity, forced to be called the Ural Cossacks. Third, the prosperous city of Yeysk-Gorodok had its name scraped off the map, replaced by the soulless name Uralsk. And fourth, Pugachev's family was forced to completely abandon their surname. Not a single person carrying that bloodline was allowed to keep the name that had made the empire cower in fear. What do you think the purpose of this decree was? Justice? Don't be so naive. Justice is the ridiculous vocabulary of hypocrites. Is it deterrence? No. Its blatantly declared purpose was total oblivion. Think about it. We are talking about a river. You cannot hang a river. You cannot throw a river into a dungeon to punish it for the crime of harboring rebels. So why erase its name? Because, my friends, you don't erase the name of a river to punish a criminal. You erase the name of a river to strip away the soul of a land, to completely obliterate a civilization's claim to its very own geographical context. Catherine the Great understood a chilling truth. If you want a people to stop resisting, don't steal their weapons. Steal the name of the mountain they lean their backs against, the name of the river they drink from. When memory is stolen, their existence also turns to dust. But the truth is always stubborn. Rulers can burn maps to ashes, but they forgot one thing. They cannot burn the bone fragments buried deep beneath the permafrost, and they certainly cannot erase DNA. You see, emperors, queens, or dictators often share a common disease of megalomania. They think they can control the past. They tear up maps. They burn books. They gag the chroniclers. But they are pathetically naive in forgetting the greatest, most ruthless, and most honest library of all. A library that cannot be incinerated by fire, nor erased by decree. That is DNA, the physical proof of a ruling class, those carrying distinct genetic traits. Ghosts in flesh and bone who once trampled upon the Eurasian steppe no longer sits neatly in dusty drawers of archaeological interpretation where scholars bicker to their heart's content. No, it has been exposed, at the molecular level, as clear as daylight. Let's fast forward to 2015. Nature magazine, the holy grail of the scientific community, dropped a bomb on the traditional history establishment. A landmark study was published, and the one who lit the fuse to that bomb was David Reich, a professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School. He and his team did something insane, dissecting the genomes of 69 ancient Europeans, spanning 8,000 years of prehistoric settlement. And do you know what they found in those fragmented genetic codes? A stealth massacre, a massive, large-scale genetic replacement event across Europe about 5,000 years ago. The driving force of this shift came from axe-wielding, horse-riding nomads from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. The archaeological community calls them the Yamnaya culture. Mainstream science used to love telling you a peaceful fairy tale, that peoples migrated gently, they exchanged cultures, traded pottery, shared recipes, and just like that, intermingled their blood. How romantic. But DNA doesn't know how to lie, and it tore that garbage fairy tale to shreds. In some parts of Northern Europe, Yamnaya-related ancestry swept through and completely replaced the indigenous genetic code in just a few centuries. A few centuries for a demographic shift on a continental level. That speed is impossible for a gradual migration. It was too fast, too violent. David Reich named this brutal reality with a technical term: elite dominance. Let me translate that into human language so it's easier for you to understand. The Yamnaya didn't wander into Europe to seek asylum or make friends. They came to rule. They imposed themselves demographically upon the indigenous populations. What does that mean? It means the indigenous men were marginalized, killed off, or shoved to the bottom of the biological food chain, while the invaders, with their horses, wagons, and bronze weapons, monopolized the resources and reproductive rights. The indigenous populations continued to exist, yes, but they were stripped entirely of their power. They no longer held a genetically dominant position, nor did they have a voice in their own culture anymore. Steppe ancestry didn't just merely appear in Europe, it arrived and overwhelmed. But this genetic nightmare didn't just stop at the borders of Europe. If you are a conqueror, you will never be satisfied with just one piece of land. Reich and his colleagues didn't stop there. They continued hunting this ghost, digging up ancient genomes all across Central Asia, all the way to the windswept, sandy Tarim basin, and further towards East Asia. And guess what? The game of hide-and-seek was over. Similar Yamnaya-related ancestral signatures loomed up at every location, every nook and cranny where infamous ruling classes like the Scythians, Saka, and Pazyryk had once staked their tents. Wherever archaeology finds royal tombs covered in gold, the genetic signal of the steppe is there. Wherever there are horse-riding warriors buried alongside exquisite weapons, the Yamnaya genetic code is present. A single persistent and authoritarian genetic signal had spread and dominated the entire length of the Eurasian steppe, a power network of blood and genes stretching for thousands of kilometers. Everything seemed to have been arranged into a perfect picture of ancient Western expansion. But that was before an arid depression in Western China decided to open its mouth, vomiting out an older, deeper secret that would make the entire modern political system sweat bullets. The desert is a ruthless gatekeeper, but it is a brilliant archivist. The Tarim Basin, a bone-dry furnace located in western China, which has mummified history's greatest secrets using sand and salt. For decades, these mummies lay there with their auburn hair, high-bridged noses, and woven wool garments in a tartan style. They looked like European tourists who had accidentally wandered into the heart of Asia. And naturally, people immediately thought of the bloodthirsty Yamnaya horde I just told you about. Everything seemed to be neatly packaged, but science never likes predictable endings. In October 2021, Nature dropped a second bomb. An international research team led by scientist Chunwei Zhang extracted the genetic code of 13 individuals from the Tarim Basin. These individuals were not recent phantoms. The oldest samples had been sleeping beneath the sand for about 4,000 years. They fed these samples into the genetic distillation machine, hoping to find traces of the Yamnaya conquerors. But the computer spat out a result that made everyone freeze in their tracks. There was absolutely no trace of the Yamnaya, not a single bit. What they found was far more ancient, far deeper, and far more anomalous. Geneticists call them the ancient North Eurasians, ANE. Imagine it like this. This ANE lineage is like a ghost that was almost extinct. Everywhere else in the world, their bloodline had been diluted, absorbed, chewed up, and swallowed by migrations and wars. But by some bizarre miracle, in this arid Tarim Basin, they survived. They existed in a state of isolation and purity that bordered on the unbelievable. These were not some nouveau riche upstarts from Europe or Central Asia who had just wandered eastward on horseback. They were the original holdouts. They carried an incredibly deep origin from the far reaches of Western Eurasia, older even than the expansion of the Yamnaya horde, and they had put down roots in Tarim thousands of years before any steppe civilization in the history books reached its golden age. They were a time capsule in flesh and bone. And guess what the authorities' reaction was? Oh, the linguistic gymnastics of politicians is truly magnificent. Chinese state academies immediately pounced on this research. They waved it around like a flag of victory and loudly proclaimed, "See, the study says they are not outsiders. They are indigenous to this region." Bravo! A perfect conceptual sleight of hand. But Victor Mayer wasn't buying that garbage logic. This professor from the University of Pennsylvania has dedicated 30 solid years of his life to dissecting this subject. For those who don't know, Penn is the university that owns the museum currently holding a 5,000-year-old skull with teeth so perfect that modern dentists would be jealous. Mayer bluntly threw a bucket of cold water on those propaganda-reeking reports. He pointed out the most fundamental truth of logic. Being indigenous to the Tarim Basin does not equate to having East Asian ancestry. Listen to this carefully. A population carrying an ancient Western Eurasian genetic code, camping out in the place known today as Western China for 4,000 years, that is absolutely not proof of the profound cultural continuity of China as the state fairy tales demand. On the contrary, it is a direct slap in the face to their dogma. It is glaring proof of a truth that the mainstream doctrines are particularly allergic to, nauseated by, and unable to digest, that the Tarim Basin, for the vast majority of recorded human history, was home to a population that had not a single shred of genetic relationship with the Han Chinese civilization currently managing it. What did Professor Mayer call China's institutional reaction to his 3 decades of dedication? He didn't use the polite, gentle words of academics. He used a word as sharp as a knife: politically motivated misrepresentation. He used the word distortion, and he is not alone. A second researcher, someone who had absolutely nothing to gain by angering a superpower, also stepped forward to confirm this pathological pattern. On one side, in peer-reviewed publication after peer-reviewed publication, physical and DNA data point directly to a population of Western Eurasian origin. On the other side, the state political response smiles and flatters, describing it as a peaceful, multicultural exchange. Calling a completely alien DNA a cultural exchange? Those are not two different ways of expressing the same truth. That is a pathetic attempt to shove a Western Eurasian elephant into an East Asian cage. And believe me, when you try to bend science to serve a border, things will start to bleed. Like a blue disease, slowly eating its way into the dermis of history. Have you ever heard of the Paziric Ice Maiden? She lies here, cold and silent, in a luxurious morgue they call a museum in Novosibirsk. She lies here, in complete defiance of the desperate, screaming wishes of the Altai Parliament, who want to return her to the bosom of Mother Earth. But you know, victors always like to keep their spoils. But let's put this mummy tug-of-war aside. The Ice Maiden and her magnificent Paziric culture carry a much darker secret. A secret cast in metal and etched deep into the very dermis of their flesh. Silver. Throughout all archaeological records, the Paziric culture used silver with an obsessively consistent frequency. Every Paziric tomb that crossed a certain threshold of power and social status was packed with these items. It wasn't some random coincidence. It wasn't personal preference. It was systematic. This ruling class ate and drank entirely from silver. All the evidence points to that. This luxurious habit wasn't just confined to the Paziric heartland in the Altai Mountains. It spread like an unwritten law across the entire sphere of steppe aristocratic culture. Look over at the Scythian mounds on the Pontic steppe, filled to the brim with silver vessels of identical quality. Herodotus, the godfather of historiography, wrote about them with salivating detail. The massive collection in the basement of the Hermitage Museum, dug up from Ukrainian burial mounds throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, hammers the nail in the coffin to confirm it. At this point, archaeologists would usually dust off their hands, write a few papers praising exquisite metallurgical techniques, and go out for celebratory drinks. But they are either too stupid or they are deliberately turning a blind eye to a horrifying biological consequence. Do you know what happens when a biological body is exposed to silver in sufficient quantities for a long enough time? Modern medicine calls it by a chillingly precise name: argyria, silver poisoning. When you ingest silver, these metallic nanoparticles do not disappear. They float in your bloodstream and eventually find their way to permanently deposit in the dermis of your skin. The result? Your skin will permanently turn a blue-gray color, like a corpse that hasn't quite started decomposing yet. And listen closely. This condition is not temporary. It cannot be reversed by any medical treatment. And most importantly, it is cumulative. Imagine these individuals of the steppe ruling class. They weren't exposed to silver starting in adulthood, but from the moment they left their mother's wombs. Newborn aristocratic infants were nursed from silver cups. They drank water from silver pitchers at every meal, every day, from the moment they were born until they closed their eyes for the last time. They practiced this blindly, treating it as an inherited mark of supreme power. And over generations, the accumulation of silver deposits beneath their skin reached a depth and speed that adult exposure could never, ever replicate. They created an absolute, consistent, and measurable physical distinction against the impoverished populations they ruled. Forget those textbook essays about an aristocratic demeanor. The difference here was not metaphorical. It was literal. Their blue-gray skin stood out starkly amidst the masses of commoners. Anyone looking would instantly know who was the master and who was the servant. Now let's play detective together. Look at these 4 puzzle pieces. The massive volume of archaeological evidence regarding the elite's exclusive use of silver items, sitting proudly in one category of literature. The clinical medical science regarding argyria, tossed aside in another category of literature. The etymology of the term blue blood, royal blood, or blue blood. The phrase commoners used to call the pale, blue-skinned nobles, tucked away in a third corner of literature, and the genetic DNA evidence of the ruthless dominance of the elite class, located in a 4th category of literature. These 4 massive blocks of evidence, 4 glaring truths, and yet they have never been assembled in the same room by anyone holding an institutional position in academia. Not a single one. Not a single peer-reviewed publication has dared to connect the Paziric silver cups with silver poisoning in the context of steppe class stratification. Why? Why are these blocks of knowledge locked away in isolated quarantine rooms? Because if you put them together, you will completely destroy every peaceful historical narrative that superpowers have been trying so hard to shove into our heads. You will prove that power is not naturally born from consensus, but that it is imposed through genetic violence and ruthless biological segregation. You know, we humans have a very funny habit. We love strolling through ancient ruins, gazing up at magnificent domes, snapping a few photos, and nodding in praise. Wow, ancient people were really skilled. We think we are seeing the whole picture, but the reality? We are only looking at an empty shell, a magnificent piece of hardware that has been stripped of all its software. And today, I will show you how history has been ruthlessly formatted. Let's start with something seemingly harmless: sound. In 2016, a team of researchers at Greek universities published a report. It wasn't in some cheap conspiracy theory magazine, but sitting proudly in the Journal of the Society of Architectural Historians, a proper, peer-reviewed journal. They brought equipment to map the acoustic properties of 8 Byzantine churches in Thessaloniki. And do you know what they found? Those ancient builders didn't just stack bricks on top of each other. They were master acoustic engineers. They directly embedded terracotta acoustic jars, known as amphorae, deep into the walls and domes. Why? To decorate for the rats staring at the stars? No, that was the quantum mechanics engineering of the ancient world. Those jars were intentionally calculated and designed based on resonant frequencies to amplify specific tonal ranges. The architecture was precisely calibrated to the frequencies of the musical instruments of that era, instruments tuned to standards that we today don't even recognize anymore. But here's the ironic part, the dark humor of history that I want you to swallow. Those miraculous architectures needed the sounds of specific instruments, of specific bells to activate the system. So, where are those bells? From the French Revolution all the way to World War II, Europe, which calls itself the cradle of civilization, threw approximately 425,000 church bells into massive furnaces. 425,000 bells. They melted down acoustic masterpieces to cast into guns and ammunition, so they could blow each other's brains out more efficiently. And when the metal melted, when the bells of those instruments were turned into weapons, the ancient frequencies they carried were permanently annihilated along with them. You see what I mean? The buildings still stand, the bricks and stones are still there, but the frequencies, the soul of the structure, have evaporated. The architecture exists, but the knowledge of how to operate it is dead. Now, take that rule and magnify it. Apply that exact same motif to every scale of human civilization. Look at the massive burial mounds of the ancient ruling class on the steppes. They still lie there, silent beneath the grass for thousands of years. We dig up the skeletons, we pick up the exquisite silver vessels. We see the bizarre tattoos on the dried up skin of mummies. But so what? The knowledge of what the true meaning behind those tattoos is? What power the silver vessel signifies? What the true principles were that helped these lineages rule over a vast expanse of Eurasia? All of it is gone. And do not be so naive as to think they disappeared due to the erosion of time or because people accidentally forgot. No, my friend, history is not an absent-minded fool. History is a cold-blooded assassin. That knowledge was wiped out through the specific, systematic, and targeted elimination of the people who held that knowledge. When you want to kill an ideology, a civilization, you don't need to smash the buildings. You just need to melt down the bells and slit the throats of the people who know how to ring them. The convergence of these disappearances is not a coincidence. It is a crime scene. And I have spent 3 weeks digging through this crime scene. Let me tell you a secret about being an excavator of history. If you find one clue, you call it a discovery. If you find 2 matching clues, you call it interesting. But if you find dozens of clues from dozens of different fields, all simultaneously pointing their spears in a single direction, what do you call it? You call it a trap, or a massive, hidden truth. I spent a solid 3 weeks locking myself in this pile of documents before writing a single word for you. And believe me, it wasn't because the fragments of truth were too hard to find. Quite the opposite. Every piece of evidence I have just laid out for you, and am about to lay out, is verifiable. They sit proudly in strictly peer-reviewed scientific journals, lurk in the suffocating reading rooms of the CIA, and lie dormant in the archival catalogs of museums. Places where the organizations holding true power pray you will never file a request to see. What made me hesitate was not the scarcity, but the crushing weight of the convergence. Imagine you are putting together a giant puzzle. Genetics, archaeology, etymology, physical chemistry, and even state-level historical whitewashing, they all fit together in a chilling way. It is too neat, too convenient. It looks exactly like the perfect conspiracy theory motif that a delusional amateur researcher draws up when he is too desperate to see what he already believes. And because I don't want to be a fool deluding myself, I did the exact opposite. I turned myself into the devil's advocate. I spent the entire following week solely trying to smash my own argument to pieces. I searched for the sharpest, most ruthless counter-arguments to tear this picture apart. Let's look at the chemical evidence. The connection to argyria, silver poisoning. Yes, the chemical reaction turning human skin a dark blue upon exposure to silver is a medical fact. But to be brutally honest, we do not have a single direct line of text saying, oh, those ancient steppe warlords had blue skin because they drank wine from silver cups. It is just an inference, a logical deduction from their excessive use of silver items, but still just an inference. Strike one. Next the Yamnaya expansion. Ancient DNA doesn't lie. They really did sweep across Europe. But hold on. Was it an elite dominance conquest by a superior class, or simply a massive migration of sheep herders looking for new pastures? The academic world is currently bashing each other's heads in over this. The demographic-leaning folks dismiss the political element. Strike two. Then there are the Tarim mummies in China. Sure, Beijing's stance on the origins of these mummies reeks of politics. They don't want some Indo-European race taking root in Xinjiang since ancient times. But, to be fair, it's not just China doubting Professor Victor Mayer. There are other independent scientists who also question the way he interprets the data. And that's not all. The 2021 Nature study on the ancient North Eurasians threw a bomb into this mess, complicating the entire narrative of Yamnaya origins. The picture is no longer just black and white. And finally, the CIA document about the erasure of the name Tartaria. Well, it is genuinely alarming. It is concrete proof of an act of institutional historical destruction by the Soviet Union in 1944. But a state falsifying history in the 20th century does not equate to a shadow organization continually covering up history for 2,000 years. One event does not make a dynasty. All of those counter-arguments are facts. They all impose rigid boundaries on our argument. If this were a trial, the defense attorney could have used them to sow reasonable doubt. But after you have thrown all those bones of doubt to the academic hounds, look at what is still left. Look at the unburnable dregs of history, the auburn hair of the Churchan man, an undeniable alien trait confirmed not by one, but by every researcher who has ever laid hands on him. The pure European haplogroup of the Ice Maiden, right in the heart of Asia. Not guesswork, but cold molecular analytical results. The mysterious silver cup of the Golden Man still sitting arrogantly in a museum in Kazakhstan, like a silent witness defying time. And remember the CIA report. A hardened intelligence analyst trained to write the driest and most neutral things, deliberately discarded caution to choose exactly one word: falsified. How do we explain a supremely powerful empress passing a law demanding her subjects forget a name? She legislated absolute oblivion. And here's the beautiful finishing blow of truth. The first edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, humanity's most prestigious encyclopedia, published in 1771, printed in plain text that the territory of Tartaria was the largest country in the world. Do you know what happened right after that? Exactly 1 year later, in 1772, the bloodiest and largest rebellion in the entire history of Russia erupted right in that very territory. I can accept one coincidence. I can turn a blind eye to two coincidences. But I cannot and will never bend my spine to believe that all these puzzle pieces are merely the randomness of the universe. Not because this evidence has reached a state of flawless, absolute perfection, but because if you want to choose the alternative explanation, that no ruling class was eradicated, that there was no manipulation, and then you are forced to place absolute faith in the benevolence and honesty of empires, superpowers, and massive institutions. And let me be honest with you, history has proven those institutions have never deserved a single gram of our trust. Now, let's examine the real paradigm they have kept hidden. Are you ready to go all the way down this rabbit hole? If you are truly brave enough to go with me to the very bottom of this rabbit hole, casting aside all the spoon feeding of regular textbooks, then here is the big picture that this insane paradigm points to. Fasten your seatbelts. For about 2,000 years, stretching from the time the Yamnaya began spilling out of the steppes around 3000 BC, all the way to the collapse of the Mongol Empire system in the 14th and 15th centuries, this world was pulled by the strings of a phantom. It wasn't a loose dynasty, it was a ruling class with distinct genetic differences, completely recognizable to the naked eye through physical traits. And they, those strangers with superior physical forms, had the world by the throat. They controlled every vital corridor of trade, every migration route, and decided every war across the entire Eurasian continent. You think I'm making this up? You think this is a sci-fi movie script? No. Every civilization with a writing system on this planet, whenever they accidentally collided with them, had to trembling pick up their pens and record it. The ancient Greeks, so arrogant with their philosophy, had to waste countless ink and paper writing impossibly long descriptions of them. The Persians? Oh, the great Persians! They once mobilized the largest, most terrifying army of the ancient world to drag their bodies to invade the territory of these people. And do you know what the outcome was? That mighty army sneaked back, turned tail, and ran home, without daring to fight a single battle. The silence of swords and spears is sometimes the most cowardly confession. Look over to the east. The Chinese had to mobilize human and material resources across generations to build the Great Wall. What do you think they built that giant stone fence for? For sightseeing? No. The vast majority of that structure was erected in pure desperation, just trying to hold back the terrifying pressure that this steppe ruling class slammed down upon the northern borders of the small agricultural inhabitants. Medieval Arab scholars also wrote about them, under different names, in different languages, but they were all describing the same ruling population over the same core territory. And then European cartographers gathered all those records. They collected first-hand accounts from hardcore medieval backpackers like Marco Polo or Ibn Battuta. Based on all the data, all the witnesses, Europe put pen to paper and drew the map of the territory occupied by this population, slapped on it the label, the largest country in the world, and they called it Tartaria. But this is where you need to abandon your old ways of thinking. When you hear the word empire, you're thinking of Rome, right? You think of emperors wearing red togas sitting on thrones in Rome, directing rigid desk jockey bureaucrats. Dead wrong. Their concept of power went far beyond that sclerotic bureaucratic system. The Tartarian ruling class was not a single centralized empire. They were a decentralized network of nobility. Imagine it as a giant mafia family, where the clans were tightly knit together by blood, by genealogical networks, and by a highly specific material culture. The jewelry, the metallurgical techniques, the burial rituals acting as an ID card, marking elite status. A network of power casting its shadow over 8,000 kilometers of endless grasslands. What truly bound them together, stronger than any constitution or law, was the recognition of a common origin. Have you ever heard of the Mongol concept of the Golden Family? It was a divine genealogical lineage, where by law, only those carrying that bloodline were legally entitled to become the Great Khan. That was the absolute, ultimate, and clearest manifestation in history of a principle that had been deeply rooted in steppe rule for thousands of years. When Genghis Khan formalized this golden family rule in the 13th century, the truth is that the great Khan did not invent a new idea. Not at all. He was simply systematizing a tradition that was incredibly ancient. It was so ancient that the legendary Scythian warriors operated their entire society on that exact mindset dating back 1,500 years before Genghis Khan even let out his first cry. And the seeds of that bloodthirsty and proud tradition scattered everywhere. The Western heirs wholly embraced the concept of bloodline superiority, carrying it straight into the Iberian Peninsula. There, they dressed it up with an incredibly glamorous name that we still use to this day: blue blood. They even built a massive legal framework just to protect the purity of that blood. But this knowledge, this history of the Golden Family, why do we know nothing about it today? Why is the great name of Tartaria now nothing more than an invisible ghost? That, my friend, is when the cleaners of history start to show up. Look at this fire. It is the greatest weapon of those in power. An enemy can kill your physical body with lead bullets, but to kill your very existence, they use fire. We have talked about the golden bloodline, about the rulers of the steppe. So what happened to them? How did a shadow empire evaporate from the minds of humanity? The eastern heirs of this tradition clung tenaciously to the Tarim basin for 4,000 years, 4 millennia of glory before a modern government, with its fresh and clear-cut claims of territorial sovereignty, decided, no, you do not belong to this history anymore. They slapped a new label over the ancient mummies. Erased. The Mongol heirs maintained the title of the Golden Family right up until the expansionist tanks of the Russian Empire rolled over and crushed the steppe. Pugachev's Great Rebellion broke out, shaking the very throne of Russia. And how did Empress Catherine the Great react? She didn't just suppress it. She issued a decree, something called the Decree of Absolute Oblivion. Absolute, total oblivion. That was not a literary metaphor. It was the law, a kind of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, severing the final explicit political claim of an entire lineage. They weren't just killed, their names were scraped clean from every stone stele, every official document, but that was merely the game of feudal monarchs. What happened next in the 20th century was truly a masterpiece of lies on an industrial scale. August 1944. While the whole world was drowning in the bloodbath of World War II, while millions were dying on the front lines, a faction of the Soviet Union was busy with another war. The war against the past. A top-secret directive was issued to the Tatar Provincial Committee. Its content? Ordering a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria. Do you find that terminology disgusting and ridiculous? Scientific revision. As if history were a disease, and they were surgeons using scalpels to excise the tumors of truth. That directive blatantly demanded the elimination of what they called serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character. But the truth often has a very bad habit. It always finds a way to leave a trace. 13 years later, a CIA analyst was digging through intelligence documents. And this spy, someone working for an agency that is no stranger to manipulating the truth, was left stunned by the sheer scale of this brainwashing. In a report that was sealed and kept tightly classified for 42 years, that CIA analyst had to throw away all diplomatic understatements. He chose his word like choosing a bullet. History had been falsified. He wrote bluntly that history had to be rewritten to conceal the facts about the actual course of relations between the Tatars and the Russians. And here is the detail that sends chills down my spine. The history books that presented the truth honestly were confiscated. They were not boxed up, nor were they taken down into deep underground storage vaults. No, they were destroyed. They burned them. They crushed them into pulp. They turned them into nothingness, leaving behind not a single corpse for future generations to autopsy. Now, you might be sitting there, leaning back in your chair, telling yourself, "Come on, Zorro. That's a Russian thing, a Chinese thing, a medieval European thing. It's so far away. That couldn't happen in free, democratic places." Is that so? Let me turn to the nearby hidden pages of history and see how this motif repeats itself perfectly right in the heart of the modern world. Have you ever heard of the 1890 United States Census? It wasn't just some ordinary headcount paper. It was the single most vital, detailed demographic record, documenting every American alive during the most crucial transitional period in U.S. history. A massive treasure trove of data containing the truth about demographics, migrations, and the secrets of a nation taking shape. And guess where that priceless treasure is now? It was destroyed, wiped out, vanished, a convenient fire. The most core data could not be recovered. Once again, the numbers that could speak were forced into silence. They say that history is written by the victors, but they forgot to mention the second part of that proverb. True history is burned to ashes by those who are trembling in fear. The bells carrying ancient frequencies were melted down. The families carrying the golden bloodline were stripped of their identities. The encyclopedias were altered, and the demographic archives went up in flames. If all these puzzle pieces are merely the randomness of the universe, then this universe is truly a comedian with a very sick sense of humor. But if this is a setup, then the only question I have for you right now is, the world you are living in, the history you believe in the end, what percentage is the truth and what percentage is the ashes of lies? Let's begin with a coincidence. Or should I call it a sick joke of fate? 1921, America. The 1890 United States Census records, a massive treasure trove of data detailing exactly who was where, doing what, throughout decades of upheaval. It was the only ledger capable of tracking 250,000 nameless children. 250,000 children of unknown origin, thrown onto orphan trains and distributed across a vast continent like living parcels. Who were their parents? Where did their flesh and blood originate? It was all in that stack of files. But guess what happened? On the exact day, yes, you heard that right, exactly one day, before the first stone was laid to build the fireproof National Archives building authorized by Congress, the place that was supposed to protect these documents forever. A nameless fire swallowed everything whole. Out of the 63 million names of lives that once breathed on the American continent, the fire chewed them up and spat out fewer than 6,200 surviving entries. A survival rate of 0.009%. You call that an accident? I call that a perfect demographic erasure. No data, no past. No past, and those children are forever drifting ghosts in their own homeland. And if the fire in America is too hot, let me take you to the bone-chilling cold of Russia in 1929. The Russian sky once possessed an exclusive sound, the sound of bells. These weren't the cheap bells you see at a neighborhood church. These were over 1 million massive bronze instruments crafted and tuned by bell-founding families carrying the blood of artisans passed down from generation to generation. Their knowledge wasn't on paper. It was in the vibration of the metal, in the pitch-perfect ears honed over centuries. Then a Soviet decree struck down. They didn't just destroy the bells. They melted them down. Giant furnaces swallowed the bronze souls of an entire nation. The artisan families were torn apart, scattered, or vanished into thin air. Decades later, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia frantically tried to revive the bell-founding industry. But do you know what the tragedy is? Every technique had to be fumbled out from scratch. That knowledge wasn't lost the way someone drops a key. It was severed by a deliberate guillotine blade. 1 million bronze voices were forced into eternal silence. But killing the sound is still not enough. You want to truly strangle a nation? Strip them of their language. Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Bashkir. Look at the indigenous peoples of the steppe. Their languages are living museums containing dozens of words for profound concepts and worldviews that Russian or Chinese simply have no words to translate. But according to the very CIA declassified documents later on, and they used a very fitting phrase, degradation and suppression. The literary works of these peoples were thrown onto banned lists unless they bent the knee to praise the greatness of Russian civilization. You have epic poems honoring steppe heroes before the Russians arrived. Wonderful. The government will kindly help you reclassify them as filthy works praising violence and looting. Everything is turned upside down. Heroes become bandits. Bandits become saviors. But the cruelest thing is not burning books or smashing bells. The cruelest thing is breaking the spines of those who hold the truth. Let me tell you about Ermakhan Bekmakhanov. He was no ordinary man. He was the first Kazakh to receive a doctorate in history, a brilliant intellectual. Bekmakhanov spent his youth researching and publishing a massive work praising Kenesari, the last Khan of the Kazakhs, leader of the bloody 10-year rebellion against the expansionist tentacles of the Russian Empire. The truth was written down, the evidence was glaring. But the truth has no place when it displeases the Communist Party. Chilling warnings began to be sent. December 1950, the newspaper Pravda, Truth, how ironic the name sounds, published an article that sealed his fate. It redefined Kenesari's entire national liberation struggle as a reactionary feudal movement. Bekmakhanov was backed into a corner. He was forced to do something more brutal than suicide. He had to pick up his pen and rewrite his entire doctoral research with his own hands. He had to slap himself in the face, spit on the legacy he had just honored, to draw conclusions that entirely contradicted the scientific evidence he himself had discovered. A profound historian forced to write against the truth, simply because the people sitting on high demanded it. Try to imagine the ultimate humiliation gnawing at his soul every night. Bells melted down, records burned to ashes, languages strangled, a scholar's pride crushed. Do you think these are random events? That this world is just experiencing a series of unfortunate accidents? Oh no, my friend. When you step back far enough to see the big picture, you will see a pattern, a historical meat grinder operating silently, smoothly, clearing the ground to construct the greatest lie on the planet. You're waiting for me to name and point fingers at a secret organization, aren't you? Some Illuminati secret society wearing black cloaks, sitting in a cigar smoke-filled room in London or Moscow. banging a gavel on the table and ordering, "Today we shall wipe out 2,000 years of Eurasian history? If so, that's quite disappointing. The truth is far more brutal than Hollywood movies, because there is absolutely no one sitting in that room. There is no coordination, no master plan, no mastermind. This pattern, bells melted, records burned, languages suppressed, mummies mislabeled, great ruling classes demoted to savages, territories truncated, rivers stripped and given alien names, and scholars having their pens bent. This pattern repeats itself at every scale, from east to west. It spreads like a natural virus within the immune systems of empires. Why? Because every entity of power has its innate hungers, and they act entirely based on their own selfish motives. Look at the arrogance of the Russian Empire. What did Tsarist legitimacy demand? It craved a stage where the wild steppe populations had to play the roles of primitive, benighted subjects, groveling on the filthy dirt in gratitude for the glittering light of civilization brought by the Russians. You cannot civilize someone who already possesses a glorious civilization, right? And what about China? Their territorial claims in Xinjiang are like a contract of perpetual ownership. To rationalize it, they demand that the barren Tarim basin must always, and forever be inherently Chinese at its core. From the dawn of time, it must have been theirs. And let's not forget our Western friends. The myth of the European aristocracy, those who pride themselves on their noble lineages. Their blue blood, according to the script, must necessarily sprout from the mystical Germanic forest or from the superiority of Roman law. How could their self-esteem possibly accept that their ruling origins stemmed from nomadic grasslands full of horse manure? 3 entities, 3 motives, 3 entirely different self-flattering scripts, but the result obtained? Absolutely identical. The history of proud peoples, those who once reigned on horseback, trampling and controlling the center of the world for 2,000 years, suddenly evaporated, vanishing from all directions simultaneously. The memory of them was dismantled, chopped to pieces, and replaced by a chaotic mess of national discourses. In the fresh history books written in blood and arrogance, the masters of the steppe now only appear as faint obstacles, foolish villains serving as the backdrop for someone else's heroic tale. Once you have seen this collective brainwashing, I swear to you, you will never be able to unsee it. It is everywhere. Don't take my word for it. Let me give you the physical evidence, the things the fire hasn't managed to lick yet. First, the auburn hair of the Chechen man. Second, the pure European haplogroup signature flowing in the DNA of the Ice Maiden. Third, the unbelievably exquisitely crafted silver cup of the Golden Man. And fourth, the glaringly visible blue veins beneath the pale skin of a Castilian noble in Spain. These 4 puzzle pieces, they sound like truths tossed haphazardly into entirely separate, hidden corners. But no, put them on the table and you will see. They are 4 points on the exact same straight line. A straight line piercing through space and time. It begins with yellow documents locked securely in the CIA reading rooms. It runs through the cold, ruthless laws signed by royal decree by Catherine the Great. It crosses 3 decades of resilient, organized resistance by a lone scholar named Victor Mayer. And then, it slams straight into a wall, ending at an inanimate glass case inside a museum in Urumqi. And there in Urumqi, you will see the most ridiculous joke of modern history. Inside that glass case is the Chechen man. A man standing 6 feet tall, over 1.8 meters. He has fiery auburn hair and is draped in a checkered wool garment, the kind of material and pattern you'd think could only exist in the misty Scottish Highlands. And do you know what the museum's official records have labeled him as? Han Chinese. Yes. A 6-foot-tall man with auburn hair wearing tartan plaid wool buried in the Xinjiang desert thousands of years ago, classified as Han Chinese. History isn't just killed, my friends. It is also dressed in clown clothes to amuse the living. And in the next part, we will open these glass cases to see what these speechless corpses are screaming about. The Churchin man we just mentioned. He is still lying there, in Urumqi, locked inside this glass cage, acting as a silent sacrificial lamb for the tourist guidebooks. If you read the official documents solemnly pasted next to the glass case, you will see words glittering as if gilded in gold. They describe these Tarim mummies as vivid proof of ancient multicultural exchange. Oh, multicultural exchange. How soothing, how humane that sounds, like a UNESCO promotional brochure. You can almost imagine Easterners and Westerners sitting together, drinking tea, exchanging silk, and singing cheerfully. But let me rip off that linguistic mask. The truth is, these mummies belong to a distinct population carrying deep Western Eurasian bloodlines. They had rooted themselves and lived in this arid Tarim basin for 4,000 years. 4,000 years, my friends. Meaning very, very long before any east-west contact or Silk Road was historically verified. So that phrase, multicultural exchange, is actually performing the exact same dirty task as absolute oblivion. It erases the historical ownership of a race. It's just doing it with a much more clever and sanitized public relations PR campaign. Now, let's leave the desert. Put on a warm coat because I am taking you to Novosibirsk, where another treasure lies fast asleep. The Ice Maiden. She is still there. The tattoos on her flesh have been photographed from every angle, taken into laboratories, and scrutinized by thousands of scholars across the world. Experts have shuddered when estimating that to create tattoos with this level of complexity and sophistication using primitive tools, the artist had to expend hundreds of hours of ultimate dexterity and patience. It wasn't an impulsive hobby. It was an institutionalized ritual, an art nurtured and passed down through generations of the same cultural current. But what is the tragedy here? The knowledge of the meaning behind those motifs has permanently vanished into thin air. Why the coiled antlered deer? What royal status did it mark? What majestic identity did it declare to those who could read them? No one knows. That knowledge is unrecoverable. The tattoo artists have turned to dust. The generations who could read the book on her skin during that era have also been crushed by time. The Ice Maiden's skin is like the black box of a blown-up flight. It perfectly remembers everything. It preserves the entire truth. But not a single person alive on this earth can decode it to speak it out. Those who rewrite history can burn books, can rename rivers, but there is one thing they cannot lay their hands on: genetic evidence. Welcome to David Reich's laboratory at Harvard University. While the bribed historians are still arguing over who masters which land, the ancient DNA sequencers at Harvard quietly print out undeniable results. And with every new data set published, the big picture becomes ever more ruthless and impossible to deny. The data points directly to a single reality. A specific group of people originating from a specific steppe rose up like a storm. They expanded across the entire breadth of the Eurasian continent. They swung swords, rode horses, and established magnificent ruling classes at both ends of the world and everywhere they went. But then, how was that great legacy treated? It was torn apart like a tasty piece of bait. It was chopped up and distributed into so many separate so-called national discourses. The Russians took a piece, China snatched a piece, Spain, Britain, Iran, Kazakhstan. Each nation carved out a slice for themselves to paste into their textbooks, painting over it to serve their narrow, ethnocentric egos. It was smashed to pieces so thoroughly that today, not a single institution in the world has the courage or the political motivation to gather those fragments and reconnect them into an intact picture. Who wants to admit that their proud ancestors were actually nomads from a strange, distant steppe? The truth is lying scattered everywhere, but no one wants to pick it up. In this final part, we will examine the remaining fragments, and I will answer the most haunting question for you. Why? Why is an oblivion worth 2 centuries of human effort? So, the fragments of a great empire have been blown up, scattered into every corner of the earth. You want to find the crime scene? It isn't located in any one specific place. The exquisitely carved silver cups are displayed with fake pride in the Hermitage Museum. Solid gold lies scattered in Kazakhstan. The DNA codes of the conquerors are kept under house arrest in dry scientific journals, serving only balding scholars. The etymology of dead languages lies dormant in any decent dictionary collecting dust on your bookshelf. But there is one thing that isn't a lie. Somewhere in Langley, Virginia, CIA headquarters, in a dark archive room, a declassified document from as far back as 1957 had to put pen to paper and use the word falsified. Faked to precisely describe what the authorities had molded regarding this page of history on one side of the ledger. Even the professionals in lying had to admit that history had been falsified. But political power can never erase everything. There are secrets so massive, they hide in plain sight, right in the language you use every day, right beneath your skin. Let's take the phrase blue blood as an example, a phrase symbolizing royalty, the upper aristocratic class. Children learn it from fairy tales before they even know how to spell. But have you ever asked yourself, why blue? Human blood is red. Why did no one question it? Why did all of humanity accept a glaring absurdity as a profound truth? Because if you questioned it, you would have to trace it back. You would have to go back in time through the Visigothic period in Spain. From there, you would be yanked back to the vast Pontic steppe. Further still, you would face the storming expansion of the horse-riding Yamnaya. And then, the time train would hurl you all the way back to the ancient North Eurasian population. A shocking study in Nature magazine in 2021 found this population preserved intact, right in the barren Tarim basin. A human population so isolated that they were intentionally maintained in their genetic continuity. They still carried within them the pure ancestral traits that the rest of the world had hybridized, absorbed, and forgotten for thousands of years. Long before that 6-foot-tall Churchin man let out his first cry. The pale skin, revealing the blue veins of those steppe nomads, became the standard of nobility in Europe. That phrase, blue blood, my friends, it is remembering what the governments have decided you are not allowed to know. The veins are still blue. The grass on the steppe still grows back every spring. The mummies carrying the truth still lie exposed in glass cases in Xinjiang. And that river, the river renamed by Empress Catherine in 1775, it is still flowing under the name she bestowed upon it. Why would a supremely powerful empress bother renaming an inanimate river? Not because the new name was prettier, but so its previous name could be drowned in the black mud of absolute oblivion. So the generations who once lived beside it under its true name would slowly forget their roots. Stripped of their name, they are no longer who they were. And the result of that dark magic? 250 years later today, you open a map, read about a river named the Ural, and you never once, not even once, question, what was it called before that empress decided to shove it into history's paper shredder? Remember, the question we posed on this journey was never whether that glorious history of Central Eurasia actually took place. We are already up to our necks in evidence. The real question, the cruelest and darkest question is, what are we being forced to forget? And what the hell is beneath those layers of hazy dust that whitewashing it is worth 2 centuries of effort, blood, and lies from the most powerful empires on the planet? The truth is always there. It's just a matter of whether you want to see it or not. I am Zorro. See you in the next dark corners of history.